Welcome to the John Harrison Podcast. Statistics show us that about 70% of people are disengaged in the workplace. Obviously, that affects bottom lines of companies, individual, their own engagement at work, but also affects families and communities. We don't want to just be frustrated about things that are going on in the workplace or in the world. We want to do something about it. So we're going to talk about this while others aren't, and we hope you will join us on this journey.
Welcome back to the John Harrison Podcast. This is Madeline Baker, and I have Melissa Dunn from our team here. And then we also have our guest that we're on a recent episode that we just recorded. We have Christy Loggins from Central Arkansas Water, and then Robbie Robinson, who is calling in. He is from the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. We kind of introduced them in a little more detail on that past episode, so I'll make sure that is linked down below. But they are very special clients, ambassadors for us. They really do a great job of highlighting the VIP way in their own organizations. And we always talk about the VIP way being a holistic process, and we are just always so excited to hear about the ways that they're conducting the VIP way and living it out in their own organizations. So I'm going to we can do a quick intro to them, but if you'd like to hear more, I will have that episode linked down below. But Christy, you want to tell just a bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Christy Loggins. As she said, I work for Central Arkansas Water. I'm over their training and development department. I've had the pleasure of being part of VIP2 for the last 5 years since I've been there, although CAW's actually been a customer for 7. So we're really vested in making sure that those principles are part of our culture and that our employees are living it out every day.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
Thank you, Christy. And then Robbie.
Hi, my name is Robbie Robinson. I am the Deputy Executive Officer at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. I've been a client of the VIP team and John Harrison team for several years now. I started out with him when I was at the Food and Drug Administration in Arkansas, and I've been blessed to have them join me as I've moved positions and now work for the National Institutes of Health. Definitely happy to be here today and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Robbie. Yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit about delivering feedback. I know that can be really difficult for a leader, especially if you're delivering feedback to an employee that you like all your employees, you should, but especially if you're like very close with them. I'm just picturing as a leader, like you may be really good friends and enjoy the company of your employees, but then you may have to deliver hard feedback sometimes. You should have to deliver hard feedback sometimes. And Christy, I was just thinking through, you said that Central Arkansas Water has been with us for 7 years now, and we're conducting your upward feedback surveys right now, which is where employees rate their leaders. And so you have quite a few leaders that are getting, they've had 7 years of feedback. And so that is so cool to see, you can actually see it with graphs. And Robbie is going down that same path this year. But yeah, we're thrilled that y'all both are going down that path of doing that. But I know just giving feedback in general is difficult. Mm-hmm. I'm sure y'all have received feedback in your past. So what is the most valuable piece of feedback that you ever received?
I was told once that you're very passionate, but you've got to learn how to balance it and control it. So it started out like, yeah, and then it was like, ooh. Which is what we tell people, right? You want to make sure you have a positive in there. So I was wondering, I was like, well, what do you mean by that? Mm-hmm. And it was like, I love your spirit. I love how passionate you are about things. But sometimes you have to pick what you say, and timing is everything, right? Yeah. So I had to, take a step back and really think about what they were saying, because they didn't just go into detail. But I know we've talked about personality. I'm a lion, mm-hmm. right? So I roar first, and then I sit back and watch how it impacts everybody around me. So I really started to do something that my mom said a long time ago. She was like, you know why you have 2 ears and 1 mouth? And I was like, no. And she said, because you should listen twice as much as you talk. Mm-hmm. So that came into play with the whole passion. So I was like, I need to do a better job of listening and not listening to respond, but listening to hear, because they're different. Yeah. And sometimes the passion in me is listening to respond to the point that you'll be talking and I'll be writing down what I'm going to say because I don't want to forget it, right? Which means I'm missing half of what it is you're trying to convey to me. Yeah. So I think that was probably the best piece of feedback I've ever gotten, is kind of take a little bit of time and don't always react. Don't lose the passion. You know, you should all stand for something, but make sure you're also listening and you understand what the ask is before you start doing.
That's really good.
Gosh, I definitely have experience receiving some really valuable feedback. One story I'll share briefly is this feedback I received from an employee I had, and who said that he wished that I would have provided more timely feedback to him throughout the course of the year. So each year we have, of course, our performance evaluation, and during this employee's performance evaluation, I gave him some feedback on a report he did, but he completed that report 7 months ago. So here I am at the end of the year giving him feedback on a report that he had completed 7 months ago and thought looked great. So I proceeded to tell him how, I wish the report, had this in it. And, so I spent some time doing a lot of rework, and it really wasn't fair to the employee. Like I said, the employee, again, 7 months ago thought the report was great. And if I would have shared that feedback with him earlier, he would have known kind of what I was looking for in the report, so that he could have, done a better job the next time. So that was a real valuable piece of feedback that I received from one of my employees that I still, carry forward to this day and really take to heart.
What about have you ever experienced time where you've received feedback that was poorly delivered? I know, Christy, you talked about the valuable feedback that you got, but you were kind of trying to pull for those details. I think that's probably important.
Well, and also, and I think part of it was they probably weren't trying to hurt my feelings, or you hear, I don't want to break your spirit, because we did have a great relationship. But I did almost have to ask, like, can you give me specifics? Yeah. And it was, just kind of think about it. And when I think about poorly delivered feedback, I think they'll give you something, I think this should be better, or the flow should be different. How? Yeah. What's missing? How would you like it to flow? Oh, you're creative, because then they don't want to micromanage, but you're really not giving me any direction to go in. And I think people do that thinking, I'm doing a great job, or I'm allowing you to be creative and come up with a different style. But if there's something I'm doing that you're not in agreement with, a detail and direction, I'm not going to say, sometimes it feels a little like an ouch, because we all want to hear great job. But if you give me direction, then I can go back, put more into it, and give you what you're looking for. And when you don't do that, or you like details, I think people walk away like, well, what I thought I had was fine, and I don't know where to go from here. So as a leader, we think, I gave them the opportunity to be creative, and they're going to give me something great. And that person is walking away feeling defeated because they don't know what direction to go in. And I've had situations where I've gone back to my office, but the next day I followed up with an email. Here are a couple of my ideas. Let me know if any of these fit, or if this is what you're looking for. Whereas if the leader had just say, hey, these are kind of some of the things I'm looking for, I wouldn't have had to take that next step. And I think sometimes projects are late because people get frustrated and they put it at the end of their pile, and I'll get to it when I get to it because I don't have enough feedback, and they just feel like I don't even want to deal with it right now.
Yeah, no, that's really good. When I think about feedback as a whole, early in my career, one of the first things that someone told me was never be afraid to ask for help, because I had such a proactive streak to my personality. I was always trying to be 2 or 3 steps ahead, and unbeknownst to me, I was causing more stress for myself because I was trying to exercise my creativity and just show my initiative, and that I really wanted to, I guess, prove myself in some ways. I was always, I wish I was still, but at the time I was usually always the youngest person on the team. That's no longer the case, obviously. But I was really working hard to show how hungry I was. And I realized real quickly that I was missing out on opportunities to collaborate with other people who had both more experience and just different experiences that I could learn from and were willing to share that with me. So I guess that's kind of where my strong sense of collaboration comes from now, because I had to learn that the hard way. But it kind of falls in line too with the, I guess, a principle my dad taught me, and that was never be afraid to ask, because what's the worst thing that's going to happen is somebody tells you no. And really, that life is full of a lot of yeses and a lot of nos, and you have to figure out how to balance the passion and the emotional response in all of those yeses and nos. So
Yeah, we were talking about having received feedback that was poorly delivered, and as I was reflecting on this question, I don't know if I've ever received feedback that was poorly delivered, but I have given feedback that I did not deliver very well. I'm thinking back to a situation, this was many years ago, where I wanted this particular employee to improve their teamwork. They weren't viewed as a team player by the rest of the team. And so I had a couple of examples that I had written down. So I thought I was prepared, but I really didn't do enough of my homework because I didn't have any specifics written down. And talking to that employee, I did separate the behavior from the person. And that was a really, really big mistake that I made. And then the last thing that I think I didn't do a very good job on at the time was that, again, these were things that happened many months ago that I was aware of, but I waited till the end of the year to deliver that feedback. So these are all things that, you look back on and say, I wish I would have done this better, but these are definitely learning opportunities, and just goes to show that, we all have things that we can work on and improve, and I definitely have come a long way in this regard. But it's tough, giving feedback, receiving feedback. It's really hard. It's really challenging. But if you embrace feedback, if you embrace coaching, it can be tremendously beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Robbie, what would you say now you've looked back, you've reflected on that? How do you now kind of prepare for those feedback conversations?
I think the biggest thing that I've done or tried to do is provide more timely feedback. So making sure that not too much time has passed between the actual incident and the feedback that I'm giving. And the other thing I do too is really kind of make sure that I separate the behavior from the person. And a lot of times I'll go back to our values. So instead of saying you weren't a team player, I'll say, one of our values here in this office is teamwork. And when you did this, it really didn't reflect the values that we try to live out and uphold each day. So any chance I get to tie, these types of conversations back to our values really helps, because again, it really helps separate the behavior from the person.
We always talk about doing that too, like tying everything back to your values as much as you can. Christy, do you have any advice for whenever you're preparing for feedback, maybe like a one-on-one meeting with somebody?
I totally agree with everything Robbie said, especially we have that get awkward early. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things we talk about. But another thing to consider, I know for me personally, is I have to watch my body language and my facial expressions, because I don't have a poker face. So I'm always trying to make sure I'm not closed off. My arms aren't folded. My legs aren't folded. I kind of have an open posture. And then I try to let them know, hey, this is what we're going to talk about. And I really want to hear what you have to say as it relates to XYZ. That way you've got time to think about it. You kind of know what the topic is, and then we can kind of move into it. And I love the, well, tell me what you think about this. Well, have you considered adding this? Or what if we did it this way and tried to structure, I love what you have here and this looks good. Trying to make sure I have some of those positives in there, but this is the piece that maybe I'm missing. Help me to understand, what did you mean by this? And allowing them to kind of tell their story. So it's not just me saying, well, I think you need to change this, or we need to do this, or now we may get to that later on in the conversation, but at least I want you to know that I value your point of view and your perspective, and I want to hear what it is, and to make sure that I have an understanding, because again, I can be that lion. So I want to make sure you don't just see that lioness, but you see somebody that even wants to collaborate with you during this conversation of some things that I think we can strengthen. You know, here's what you did really well. Here's a couple of areas that I think we can make stronger.
I like that, having an open dialogue. And then what you said at the beginning about just opening the conversation up with that of like, hey, I'm going to tell you some things, but I really want to hear what you have to say about it as well. So they like can be thinking about it.
Yeah, I try to walk through what I'm going to say with someone else before I have it. Because usually whenever you're giving feedback, especially if it's immediate feedback on a particular project, sometimes it can lean heavy to the constructive side of that feedback component. Not that there's not some positives, but particularly it's usually constructive if you're in the moment of a situation. So I like to run it by somebody who doesn't know, but also present the facts up to that point to that third person, so to speak, so that they can give me a real objective view as to some of the things that I'm going to be saying. And it's just always beneficial to do that dry run for me. And then the other thing I'll say, and I may be jumping ahead just a little bit here, is trying to make sure that I am focused on the behavior that is occurring and not the personality. I think recognizing different personalities is good, and even having a conversation around different personality types is positive, but don't lean into the personality side of the discussion as a cover or an excuse. And instead be sure to focus on what the behavior was that did not meet the expectation, and make sure that they understand that from the perspective of the original expectation. Not that you're trying to change who they are, but you're trying to change how they addressed or did not address something in the project or the discussion.
Yeah, that's really good. That helps the other person not take it, hopefully helps them not take it as personally. Yeah, but what about if you're in that one-on-one and the person is completely disagreeing with your feedback? This kind of goes back to the conversation we had in the last episode with opposing views. But how do you handle that one-on-one if someone is just like, but this is the way I did it. I like the way the report is done. Like, I don't see how I can do it any different. You know, there's just a total disagreement there.
I guess one of the things that I have adopted from John's training overall is that I don't, if I'm the person receiving the feedback, you know, I try to understand that I don't have to agree with that necessarily. But what I do have responsibility and onus of is understanding how the output did not meet the original expectation. So if I can ask questions to understand that, I think that's really where the connection can be made. But I don't have to agree with it, even though my idea was this, but the other person's idea and expectation was this. It's okay if we don't agree, but I still have to meet the expectation. Yes. And I have to do that with respect, and I have to do it with consideration of the end goal, or even how it might impact internal customers or external customers, because it's usually a much bigger influence or bigger impact than just yourself or myself, you know. So I try to look at it from that perspective and ask questions relative to that, but also understand, okay, my thought about how to do this was not matching yours, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's so, as the leader or the person guiding the conversation, to say that. I know as the person receiving it, I have to kind of think it in my mind, but what if we set it up with, well, I know we may not, because we're going back and forth here, and I know we may not totally agree, but the objective was here, and I think if we would flow it this way, then it's going to get us closer to what the original assignment was. So that's the way we're going to have to go. And I think as leaders, sometimes we don't want to be that firm. But there are times where we just have to say, I understand, and I'm not saying this was wrong. I'm just saying it wasn't the expectation of what I was looking for. So maybe I'll always put it on me, maybe I wasn't clear in communicating what my expectation was. So I will work on doing a better job of communicating that. So this is what I'm expecting, when you resubmit this or turn this back in. Once you go back, you take a minute, you look at it. If you have any questions, let's talk about it in a couple of days. Let's look it over and make sure that we're back on the same page, because I don't want to make the same mistake of miscommunicating my expectation, and I want to make sure we're on the same page, that this is what the expectation is.
Those check-ins can be invaluable in situations like that.
Yeah, and you have to follow up, though, because we'll say that all the time, and then we get busy and we don't. So let's go ahead, and if this is Monday, Wednesday afternoon, let's just kind of check back in. I want to make sure that what I said and what you heard are the same things, and that we're back on track.
Yeah.
Because I know you do really good work, and this project will not be any different.
Yeah, Christy, I was just going to say, you hit on a really, really good point about the follow-up. I know one of the things that I try to do when I'm giving feedback that maybe somebody doesn't agree with is I'll ask them to try it on. So I'll encourage them to sit with it for a while, tell them I'll follow back up, and just check in with them. Because, we've all received feedback that maybe we didn't agree with or didn't like. But it's interesting how when you sit with it for a while, you kind of try it on, and you kind of get over that initial emotional or defensive reaction, you have a different perspective. And so I always encourage folks to sit with the feedback, try it on for a little bit, and then I'll follow back up just to do another check and to kind of close that loop and see if anything's changed from that initial conversation.
Yeah, that's really good, Robbie. Just something that as you were talking that came to my mind too. I know we talk about this a lot from like the leadership perspective of things, but in thinking about it from the employee side of the equation, if we're talking about project expectations and deliverables in terms of concrete items, that's one thing. But I think the more difficult conversations to hear are particularly around behaviors. And back to Robbie's point about the values component of it, right? And to be able to assess and process as an employee what the company's values are and how I fit into those, how do my personal values fit into those company values, is equally important. And we all have a responsibility, regardless of whether you're an employee or a leader, to make that assessment on a day-to-day basis, because we live 70% of our lives at work, right? And if there is a misalignment there, then that's something that we have to give true heart and consideration to, because that's going to impact the positive or the non-positive side of our work environment, right? So I think in those behavioral moments, there really needs to be some self-reflection, and we need to be able to assess that, yes, emotionally, but also objectively in how you plan to contribute and how you plan to make changes going forward. And it's bringing me back to the upward feedback, which is where we started this conversation. But, those conversations can be hard to take in sometimes. And for those that are not doing upward feedback, it usually is an employee side of the equation. So it's a performance review or quarterly performance review, right? And we just have to really assess that in terms of alignment and positivity, and am I really willing to make these behavioral changes so that we can continue to move forward here?
You were talking, and I was thinking about a time where I was on the receiving end, and it wasn't one of those times where I was handling it well. So we were having a conversation, and we were talking about training and the difference between leadership versus supervisory training, and we were in a back and forth, because I believe that you can be a leader without having direct reports if you have influence. And the person agreed 100% opposite. You know, in order to be a leader, you have to have a supervisor, da 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 da. And I was like, well, you can be a supervisor, but if your people don't listen to you and you haven't developed those leadership skills, you're still not getting the buy-in we need. And we were trying to decide on this training curriculum, and we're going back and forth. And she kept saying, well, I don't understand. Well, help me understand. Well, I pride myself in being a pretty good communicator. So every time she would say, I don't understand, I was trying to come up with a different way to say the same thing I was saying. And I was getting frustrated. And I finally took a breath and it clicked. She understood, she didn't agree. And once it clicked in my head that you do understand what I'm saying, you just don't agree with me. Yeah. And I said, so is it that you don't understand or you don't agree? And she was like, well, I don't agree. Oh, well, we can work with that all day long, right? Yeah. But we would have stayed on that hamster wheel because the communication style wasn't there and we weren't hearing each other. Yeah. At the end of the day, the final say was hers. So we did it the way she wanted to do it. But again, that passion I told you about, I had to control some of that passion, take a step back, because I'm like, there's no other way for me to say what I'm saying. But it was the choice of words. So I think sometimes on both ends, as the person receiving, I had to stop, take a breath, and really examine, how can I say this differently? But as the leader, I think had she just said, I disagree with what you're saying, the conversation would have stopped a long time ago. But I think we were both stuck in, I'm right, you're wrong, right? Yeah. And also, I don't want to bend. Yeah. So once you say, well, no, I really don't agree. Okay, well then tell me what the plan is and we'll move forward with the plan, because at the end of the day, I answer to your leadership, right? Now, did I agree with her? No, I still don't agree with it. But I did it the way she wanted it done because she was the leader and she was in control of that project. And that's a story I share with people all the time. You don't always have to agree with everything I say, but I want us to have open dialogue, have some communication. You hear it from my point of view, but at the end of the day, you know, we're kind of going to have to go this route. So...
Before we wrap this up, Robbie, do you have any last thoughts on maybe how to deliver feedback, or maybe what you're doing now? I know y'all are embarking on upward feedback and you're excited about that.
Yeah, I really am. And you know, the goal with all this is to really kind of create a culture where, you know, giving feedback is the norm. I know in my own personal experience, you know, the first time I had to have that difficult conversation as a leader, it was hard. My stomach was in knots. I didn't get much sleep the night before. It was just really, really something I was not looking forward to doing. And it's still not my favorite part of the job, but I will say that the more you give feedback to folks, the more comfortable it becomes. And I think the better received it is because it becomes part of your culture. So I would just encourage any new leader or experienced leader or supervisor, you know, the more often you give feedback, the more you're really creating a culture of accountability where feedback is appreciated, embraced, and accepted. So,
well, thank you both, Robbie and Christy, for being on this episode. We really feel so honored that y'all took so much time out of your day to be on both of these episodes. So if y'all listening have not heard the first episode we did with them, we're talking about opposing viewpoints in that one, and how to have those difficult, you know, should be respectful conversations. I will link that down below. But thank you again for listening.
Thank you for joining us today on the John Harrison Podcast. As you know, we believe that a positive work culture creates a ripple effect that extends into families and communities. If you found anything of value in today's episode, please share it with somebody so they can hear it as well. And if you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please fill out the form below.